And we are live. I'm going to start letting people trickle in here. Thank you guys for your patience. If you were in the other meeting, we are now obviously in this one, and you seem to have found us, which is fantastic. We're having some technical difficulties with Substack. But we
Mercury retrograde.
Yes. We went through a whole situation trying to do this. Something that should have been easy. But anyway, we are here now. This is the Candidates of Our Dreams series. Those of you who are new, welcome. For those of you who have gone through several of these, welcome back. What we are doing is we are talking to progressive and democracy forward candidates all over this country. And today I am joined by Kina Collins out of Illinois 7, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a second. But a reminder that we are here to do work. We are here to learn about these candidates, what we can do to support them as they get ready for their races. Some of them are in primary situations. Some are going straight to the general to challenge incumbents. So there's much to do even right now, because especially our primary people, their things happen right. They're doing it right this minute. So Kina, on that note, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are, your district, and what the electoral date situation is for yourself at this time.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just start off top. Thank you, Kate, for having us.
Of course.
My campaign onto your show. It means a lot for you to invite us into your space. So our election is March 17th. We are in Illinois. We are the Illinois 7th Congressional District. Illinois is an early primary. We could talk a little bit about that too, about why Illinois is an early primary in the winter months. But I am Kina Collins. My background is in gun violence prevention and criminal justice reform work. I'm a daughter of the west side of Chicago, a daughter of this district. My family has been in this district for over 5 generations. Like many Black Chicagoans, we were a part of the Great Migration from the South, coming to the city of Chicago and settling in the Austin community. And Austin is like a city inside of the city. It's 100,000 people who live in my community, right? And so it is the heart and the soul of the Illinois 7th Congressional District. This is not my first time running for this seat. I did challenge 30-year incumbent Danny K. Davis. We are actually the only insurgent progressive campaign that came within striking distance of taking the seat. He has now stepped down to retire, and now we don't abandon the movements that we build, Kate. We're back to finish what we started.
Awesome, amazing. So, are you running? Is Davis a Democrat or a GOP? Okay, cool. So you are.
So
That
yeah, so
seems to be the story of Illinois right now. Is several establishment Democrats are retiring. Dick Durbin.
they all
Davis.
retired at the same time, including
Right.
our U.S. Senator Dick Durbin. So
Yes.
Illinois 7 actually is the most Democratic district in the Midwest, and we are the 5th most Democratic district in the United States of America. It is a deep, dark blue district.
Got it. Okay. So, you're kind of in a great position for a real, like, turning the page, as it were, on like what Democrat means in your district. So, if you want to tell me more, you mentioned that why do you guys have such early primaries? And I love that tea. So, please share.
Yeah, so it's everybody knows Chicago is a big political machine. And one of the machine tactics that the establishment put into place was to make our primaries in the dead of winter
Mhm.
to deter people from getting out there, A, to go to the polls, but also B, to actually have to trudge through the snow and knock on these doors to get to to get to voters.
Mhm.
And so Illinois 7's primary is in the middle of winter, and you have to collect signatures to get on the ballot. And it is a whole thing and an ordeal. But you would think that a city like Chicago and a state like Illinois that gets really brutal winters, we would have spring or summer primaries so that it would encourage more people to get out. So it's a very well known fact that the machine put that into place to deter people from getting to the polls and being on the ballot.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So I'm actually a native Chicagoan. I was born and raised for a decent amount of my life in Chicago and then Central Illinois later. So Illinois is near and dear. You're my first Illinois candidate, and I was very excited.
I didn't know that, Kate.
Yeah,
Where did
yeah.
you grow up?
I was in Oak Brook Terrace.
Okay.
So not Oak Brook, Oak Brook Terrace, which if you know, you know. If you don't know, Oak Brook is very fancy schmancy. Oak Brook Terrace is how you live next to the fancy schmancy for not, or at least back in the day. Now it's
Right.
like I drove there through there as an adult and I was like, my goodness, that is like yeah. Anyway, but
Yeah.
back in the before times in the 90s,
Yeah.
I was in Oak Brook Terrace, and I have very fond memories of Chicago, and I'm a Chicago pizza girl, and I'm an Italian beef girl, and like
Okay.
all that stuff. Yeah, just to believe I
Okay.
love
Real Chicagoan.
yes, real Chicago. So, but the winters are no joke, and when you're talking about electoral barriers, yeah, I mean, if you're, I'm in Virginia now, and so snow means like a dusting the grass, which is what we have in the summer. It's not
Right.
what you guys have. Though we did have
Polar vortexes or what they call them, polar vortexes.
yeah.
So,
We did have winds this weekend that I was like, "Okay, this is starting to remind me of Chicago. Like, this is not okay right now, except we're not built for this."
right.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you for laying out that landscape, and also that gives urgency to our conversation today. So people, we're gonna be talking about action items later, and that means action items like right this minute because Kina is coming. You are a month out from the primary. Real quick before we move on to the next parts of our agenda, how many people are in the Illinois 7 primary?
Oh my goodness. 13 candidates in total are in this race. And I think it's really to our advantage in a lot of ways. I mean, I wish that people would consolidate, but that typically fares well for candidates who have very high name recognition and who have a solidified base. And so we're coming in with a really high floor of voters on election day, and we're trying to expand that coalition in that base. But yeah, 13 candidates.
That's wild. I thought Virginia 1 has 8 right now, and I thought that was crazy. So 13 is like I'm
No.
shocked. By that, like, jeez. But you're right. Like you said, you ran before. You've been in it for you're not you know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people who stepped up this year because they're like, "Oh my god, Trump." But I definitely appreciate those who are like, "I've been building this for a while. And so I'm here. I've been here." And you're right. When there's a ton of other horses in the race, they can kind of split the rest of the vote who doesn't recognize any of the names. And meanwhile, they're like, hey, Kina, she ran before. Like, I know who that is.
Yeah.
And since you don't have an incumbent to run against, then you also have that advantage. So that's all good to know. Um, Awesome. So why are you running, Kina? Because you could be doing all sorts of other things. It's not glamorous. It's not, people think it's glamorous and fun. It's not. It's a ton of work. And you also mentioned that you have been doing a lot of work around gun safety, firearms, like that sort of thing, which is also thankless work. So why are you doing this?
Illinois 7 is a microcosm of the United States of America. It is basically the entire city of Chicago, with about 15% of the district being the western suburbs and the Chicagoland area. We have some of the wealthiest, the downtown portion of the city of Chicago is in my district, but so is the south side of the city of Chicago. We are one of the most diverse and yet one of the most unequal districts in the United States of America. And I initially stepped in because I was a national organizer with Physicians for a National Health Program, and I trained 20,000 doctors and medical students across the country to fight for a single payer universal healthcare system in our country. And in that time, I found out that Illinois 7 has the largest death gap in America between downtown Chicago and West Englewood, which is a working class Black community on the South Side. A 30-year life gap, Kate, based off of a 30-minute car ride. And we know it's because of the social determinants, right? Like, we're talking about affordability and housing and access to healthcare. We deal with medical apartheid and food deserts, and of course, a rising gun problem in the United States in our district, and it has cut the life expectancy of innocent civilians across our district. So I came in initially wanting our congressman to stop accepting corporate PAC money, number one, and number two, to really hold the Democrats' feet to the fire to say, hey, y'all, just because we're in a safe blue district doesn't mean that you don't have to do work and you shouldn't have to organize the people in this district. As a matter of fact, you should be coming into Illinois 7 to test what Democrats care about. And so that has pivoted tremendously because now the fight is about democracy.
Right.
The fight is about how fragile our democracy is right now.
Yeah.
To me, this is Project 2025. This is Project Esther. This is the suppression of our First Amendment rights.
Mhm.
Illinois 7 has become ground zero for these ICE raids. The Broadview ICE facility, where it has been getting a lot of national attention, is right here in the Illinois 7. And so for me, this is about how we built the opposition to the fascism that is not coming. It is already here. The fascism, the authoritarianism is already here. And I just do not feel like our party leadership, Kate, really understands or has a plan or a pulse on what is happening in districts like Illinois 7. Very diverse district. It is a super majority minority district, and it is a working class district flanked by very affluent parts of the state of Illinois. And I just think there's such a case to be made in Illinois 7. I'll say this final thing to land the plane. My goal is not just to win this seat. I want to turn Illinois 7 into an organizing hub of the Great Lakes. We know that a Democrat is going to win this seat. It matters who that Democrat is. We should be training up precinct captains, block captains, volunteers, phone bankers, postcard writers, and we should be flooding the Great Lakes, Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and running very competitive races, and not just running to make a statement, Kate, but running to win. This moment requires an organizer in chief to step in into a very important seat like Illinois 7, and that is my entire background.
Organizer in chief sounds, first of all, very dreamy. We're talking about the candidates of our dreams. And I, everything you're saying, I no, I love this. Okay. So having lived in the Midwest for a very long time, there is the dichotomy that you're talking about is so real. Chicago is, like you said, a microcosm of it, but it's also like you can see it in all other. I also used to live in
There you
Arkansas,
go.
but I realize it's the South, but it's also kind of Midwest. It's weird. So that you can have like super conservative and sometimes super affluent voters. You can have super liberal, but also still super affluent who are kind of cozy with the corporations and whatnot. And then you also have, like you said, a ton of working class farmers who don't understand that they need to stop voting conservative. All sorts of, all of those people are in like your district in particular, but then they're also like all over the Midwest. And so your idea of using Illinois 7 as like the training ground basically and stepping up and being like I will be that leader. Because you're right, as if you were a sitting congresswoman, you're looked to as a leader for the bench, right? And I love that attitude too, because so many are like, I'm there to get my seat and then go do the things that I want to do in that seat. And you're looking like 20 years down the line, okay, when Kina doesn't want to be in Congress anymore, like who's ready to step up and keep the movement,
That's
keep the
right.
progress going? And first
And
of
I
all,
mean,
bravo.
we have to keep it real, Kate.
Right.
Donald Trump and the GOP did not win on a mandate.
No.
This was the last election cycle was one of the closest presidential elections that we had seen in our lifetime. But what happened? Democrats lost the House, we lost the Senate, we lost the presidency. 26 out of the 50 state legislatures are GOP led, but they didn't win on a mandate. They won because we were battling with people who sat out on the couch. The pipeline is not MAGA to Democrat. That can happen. We saw that with Zoran Mamdani, right? But the pipeline is not red to blue, in my opinion. The pipeline is turning the non voter into the voter. We are battling with the people who are sitting on the couch, who want something to believe in, who want elected officials who are not just going to talk about it, but who are going to be about it when they get into those seats. And so I think what better way than to deep canvas and organize around issues all year long, not just when we need their votes, right? That is the biggest issue that we have with the disconnect with the electorate right now is that there's only a coming around when it's election time. And that is where I think Democrats are dropping the ball and where they need non-traditional organizer candidates to step in to help rebrand, reshape, and bring folks back into the party.
Amazing. Yep. Could not agree any more with what you are saying. All right. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about our candidates of our dreams checklist. So we're going to go one by one. And for those who are unfamiliar, you can check out my Substack articles about the things that I think makes the candidate of our dreams. As I disclaimer that I make every single interview, this is not a purity test. Everything that I say is a conceptual idea. Some of them are more like specific than others, but like their conceptual idea, and there's lots of different ways to tackle it. Mostly what we're looking for from candidates is a will to actually take these issues by the horns because a lot, first, the GOP, not at all, bless you, and
Thank
a lot
you.
of establishment Dems are unwilling to touch some of these what they consider third rails, and that is a problem because we the people need these things desperately. So, on that note, number one takes $0 in corporate campaign money. I think I know where you stand based on a few earlier comments, but what's your take, Kina?
Yeah, this is the number one reason why I ran against a 30-year incumbent. This the congressman who had been my congressman since I was 5 years old. And it was really hard decision, especially in, to break it down and conceptualize it in the Black community. We don't typically challenge our elders when they are in positions of power like that. That was a really hard decision for me to make. But this is about the future of our country, Kate. It's like we have to elect people who say boldly and with their chest, corporations are not individuals. The biggest issue we have in Washington, D.C. is corruption. Giant corporations that have our government by the throat, and they are declining the ability for our representatives to hold their feet to the fire in congressional hearings, ethics boards, and to really clean house.
Right.
So, to me, this is not just a policy thing. This is a life or death situation for somebody like me who lives in South Austin. I know Amazon doesn't care about the families in South Austin. The gun lobby doesn't care about us, right? Big money, dark groups, self interest groups do not care. They only care about their bottom line. And so it's important that we send somebody in there who can speak with moral authority and moral clarity.
Absolutely. I love the way you illustrated that. Like has it by the throat and is declawing. Like that's 100% what the end game is. Number two, term limits themselves and advances term limit legislation.
Yes, and we've actually signed a term limits pledge each time that I've run because I don't think that I really don't think that a U.S. rep should stay in a seat longer than 5 terms, which would be
Mhm.
10 years. It would be a decade. If you can't get done in a decade what you need to get done, then you do not need to be in this position, right? And so I do firmly believe in term limits, and it's not just an age thing. That a term limit is for the vitality of the office and the representation. We are seeing our country move rapidly and change with science and technology, and our elected officials are not keeping up. And from whether it's deep fakes or AI or coding that has to be taught to people, it's hard for me to even keep up sometimes. And I was born in the age of technology. And so I think that term limits are important to move our country forward and move the times forward. But I think it's also about as the district shifts and it becomes redistrict, they should have the opportunity to send new leaders into office.
Yeah. 100%. And for those who don't know, I believe you're referring to the US term limits pledge, right? Is that the
Yeah.
pledge that you yeah. So there's a nonpartisan agency called U.S. Term Limits, which is have been advancing term limits for Congress in particular forever, for decades, and candidates can sign their pledge saying that they will term limit themselves when they get into Congress and that they will advance term limit legislation when they get there. So
Mhm.
amazing that you are on that. Number three, this is one of my favorites, reasserts their power over the Supreme Court. Thoughts about
You know what? I heard you talking about this, Kate, jurisdiction stripping.
my favorite thing.
And yes, yes to that. There we first of all, the biggest issue I think that we're dealing with the Supreme Court that we don't talk about enough is the ethics violations.
Mhm.
We are losing the credibility of the highest court of the land, where their spouses are interfering with, I mean, life-changing, life-altering legislation that sets the legal precedent. We are talking about a body of our government that gave us the civil rights movement, right? They solidified it and codified it, and we have seen it gutted into a shell of itself because of the ethics violations and big money coming in, people being offered trips, people. So one, I like that you bring up jurisdiction stripping, which gives Congress the ability to dictate what type of cases that they can see and work on. I do think that we should be careful. It's just because the GOP is so erratic that we don't know how they would weaponize that against us. But I think that where we are right now is that I would love to see ethics in
Mhm.
particular strengthened.
Right.
And of course, our Congress is not moving on that right now because it's benefiting the GOP in more ways than one and benefiting this presidency.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely agree with having an ethics body. I know the Mexico just recently moved to fully electing their judicial branch, and it's a lot of controversy. I'm not going to get into it right now because I don't want to like get it. That's a total derailment of the conversation. But one of the things that they did in that whole judicial reform was also put in an ethics court specifically for their like all it does
Yeah.
is ethics for judges and including the Supreme Court. And it's a completely separate body. And yeah, I could not agree more with that idea.
Can I give you one thing, one antidote?
Yeah.
The election that happened, this previous election that happened, I was disgruntled like a lot of Democrats were. I felt like Joe Biden wasn't at his peak. I did understand, Black women, the history of Black women is we vote, right? Like that is our thing. We vote above the national average. And so I was just very upset that like these were our choices. And I thought, would I even support a Joe Biden? And then Trump stepped in. But the turning factor for me, because I did support a ceasefire, I was critical in the same ways that a lot of people were critical of, and rightfully so, of the Biden administration.
Mhm.
The thing that changed for me and got me straight on participating in the last election was the Supreme Court hearing, I mean, the judgment that came down about presidential immunity.
Mhm.
That was the thing that sent a chill up my spine, Kate. I thought, "Oh my god, this is, like, way beyond anything that we would be able to organize against."
Right.
I mean, it would be a monster
Yeah.
of something to deconstruct, and we are seeing this precedent
Right.
abuse that court ruling. And so that is why the Supreme Court is so important. That ethics body is so important.
Right.
Um, because it essentially gave him the green light to do a lot of what he's doing now.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember when that ruling came out and it was before all this. It was before I'd started this platform, before and yes, you're right. Like that was the moment where it was like, well, this is existential. Unfortunately, like you said, a lot of people didn't wake up to that. And I I will never stop talking about the black women in this country and how they carry the boats constantly. Not yeah, like you said, above average electoral participation, the most educated, in case any of y'all didn't know, the most educated demographic in our country is black women. So we should listen to them when they say things. That's pretty much my standard operating procedure is like, well, probably the most qualified voice in the room for the most part, and barring any other information that I don't have, like, I'll go with that. So, and people can fight me about that on their own time. But, number 4, raises wages and reinstates corporate tax marginalization. This is something I rail about all the time, so I love your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is essential at this point. I mean, even granular to our district. Illinois 7 actually holds the most hospitality workers in the state of Illinois, which are tip wage workers. And I actually got arrested with One Fair Wage protesting during COVID that they raised the hazard pay and raised the minimum wage for tip wage workers, and across the country in general. The last time the minimum wage was touched was in 2009. I was a senior graduating high school. at that point,
Yep.
right? I'm in my mid-30s now. And so people are feeling the pinch. And this is if our fiscal budget is a living, breathing moral document, then where we're pouring the resources to help people um, get that relief that they need is an indication of where we are and how healthy our soul is as a country. And so I will always stand on the side of workers and raising wages for workers across this country. You know, I don't come from a prestigious political background. I come from two manufacturing union workers. And so that is the praxis. Now, I do believe that corporations need to pay their fair share. You know, I definitely think that that is a wildly popular idea across the country, and it's well overdue. And all of these talking points that the GOP and other folks, even Democrats who defend corporations to the hilt, um, as we see SNAP being cut, as we see Medicaid being cut, as we see our fiscal budget being balanced off the backs of working class people, the biggest social welfare recipients in this country are millionaires and billionaires who get sweetheart deals. And so I do believe that they need to pay their fair share.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. I always talk about corporations are the biggest welfare queens in this country. I went off on airlines during the
Right.
shutdown because they were crying to everybody about like, "Are they?" I'm like, "Shut up." Like, you
Any
do
of the
not
billionaire tears in a coffee cup. Right.
right, right, exactly. Like, I will drink your tears happily. Number 5 increases tax marginalization for high net worth individuals. This is, kind of along the lines of corporations, but a slightly different take. So, where are you with that?
I mean, yes, and I think that the way that we need to phrase this is all in the messaging. I think that as a progressive, we need to fundamentally organize our people, organize our money, and organize our narrative. And we need to educate people about how this is a benefit to them, right? If we want a healthy workforce, if we want the ability for our students to be educated properly, if we want a proper healthcare system in the wealthiest nation on the planet that just in one of the only developed countries that does not have a universal healthcare system, the rising tide, the rising wave rises the boats, everybody's boats, and I believe that. And so yes to that. And I think that there will be some kicking and screaming along the way, but I think that this is a messaging. And I think that people have been able to escape and say that they don't trust the government to do it, but we've never truly invested in communities, in our government. So we don't know the true benefits because we haven't experienced them tangibly because when we do our fiscal budget, it's once again balanced off the back of working class people, or we overblow our Pentagon and military budget, even when they don't ask for it.
Right.
And so I think it's feasible and sensible, but I do think that it's going to take some education, advocacy, and great messaging to get people to come along.
I love that you point that out because, I've heard a lot of like just tax the rich, tax the billionaires. And I think unfortunately, because people there is so much like psychological work on this, like people see themselves as like potentially getting in the crosshairs of that. And during the big beautiful
Yes,
bill, I remember I was, like, screaming during the beautiful bill of, like, the tax cuts are for people like, if you're watching this video right now,
thank
it's
you.
not for you. None of these tax cuts are for you. Please listen when I say that if you are seeing this, and you're not one of the 971 billionaires that we have in this country, it's not
Come
for
on.
you. Like,
Come on.
yes.
I've had to have that conversation on the doors in places like Oak Park, Illinois,
Mhm.
where they believe they are part of the 1/10 of the 1%. I'm like, babe,
No, you are not.
your 150K a year is not what they're talking about.
No, no.
Right? Like I think that people when I say the education and the advocacy piece, people really don't know how wealthy the 1/10 of the 1% is in this country.
Yeah.
Like they own 99% of the wealth in the United States. These very small number of families. And so people think that they're referring to them if they're a six-figure earner or
Yeah.
no, we are talking about the wealthiest of the wealthy. in the United States. And I think that's where the messaging piece, I'm really big on that because people do get confused by that.
Right. It's like you need to be in the 9 figures, not living in California or New York. That's what we're talking about. Unless you are
Oh
a
my
millionaire,
goodness.
you're probably nowhere near what we're talking about. Alright. Number 6, bans stock buybacks. This is a bit of a wonky one, but, this is something that I'm very into. So
Yes, and I think that our legislators should not be participating in it. So when you say ban it, you mean by elected officials or what do
Oh,
you
no,
mean?
no. So I'm not referring no, I don't think elected officials should trade in the stock market. So the buyback is the mechanism by which a corporation buys back its own stock. So instead of using money to like raise wages or invest in research and development or whatever, they buy back their own stock to inflate their share prices. It used to be illegal before
Yeah,
Reagan. And I have this big joke that like everything was illegal before Reagan and now it's not anymore. Um, but it was considered market manipulation. But it's one of the ways I put it next to the increases of taxes for corporations on purpose because it is basically like you clearly have too much money if you can go around buying back your own stock. We need to either put
yeah,
it in the treasury or it needs to go towards wages. Those are the other two options. Like
yeah,
this is ridiculous. So,
yeah.
so that's
So
the stock buyback.
yeah, so, yes to that. But what I yeah, yes to that, but what I think that we have to tie this into is the larger conversation of, um, unionization that is happening amongst workers and the suppression that happens. And so, yes, you can send it back to the US Treasury, but I would advocate for it to go towards wages just given how the economy is right now. Um, but I think it's egregious that when we look at some of these corporations and they talk about to their workers, right, the deficits that they have in their budgets, and yet the CEO has gotten another $5 million bonus.
Right.
Um, this speaks to the larger workers' rights fights that are happening across the country that obviously, of course, I support.
Yeah.
And of course, legislators not buying
Right. Yes. I kind of it's funny.
that too.
I should probably add it to like number 1, which is the $0 in corporate campaign, put money and no like stock trading whatsoever. So I totally agree. What I 4, 5, and 6 I kind of put into like a bit of a package of like I want to increase their tax rates for corporations because then they'll be incentivized to increase wages because they want to lower their tax liability.
Right.
And I also want to ban stock buybacks because I don't want that to be a backdoor of like, oh well, instead like I'll just like
I
buy
can
the
weasel
stock.
my way out of it. Right.
Right, exactly. Like I'm trying to like box them in a corner basically where it's like raise the wages. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Like you don't have a choice.
Please and
Um,
thank you.
right. All right, number 7, invest in a robust, nimble, and strategic administrative state.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that is I can tell, like, just from everything that we've already said, you're like, "We need services, and we need to stop with this whole, like, the government can't be trusted with anything type thing because it's not."
Yeah.
It's like the biggest piece of another Reaganism,
Well, I
right?
mean,
Like, it's the
so
biggest piece of spam.
to say more, just to say more on it, I think that we have to have a co-governance style of
Mm,
governing between communities and congressional offices, in particular elected officials in general. What we are experiencing right now in the United States is a deterioration in trust, obviously, in our government, and that it goes into the earlier conversation that we had about technology and how I just was at a house party and someone had asked me a very important, pertinent question about how do we engage young men more into the process of democracy and government. And I said that that was a real challenge coming up because why we see the boom of the manosphere, right? We're seeing the boom of so much information being given out through social media and technology, and that is where people are receiving their information. So I support a co-governance style. I don't think, of course, we need services, we need to improve it, and we need the voices of people, constituents in the district, to be the ones to help facilitate that.
So, can you describe what a co-governance style is for anyone who's listening and is like, "I don't necessarily know what that means?"
Yeah. So co-governance is essentially you giving the ability for a community to have a voice and how
Mhm.
you govern your office and your administration in your particular district. And it's not just for congressional districts. Co-governing styles can happen in nonprofits, they can happen in fraternities and sororities, they can happen in social clubs. But particularly, I think it needs to be cultivated in government because exactly, what you're speaking about, Kate, is we're seeing more apathy amongst voters, but we're also seeing a deterioration of trust in our government. And so, examples of co-governing styles is I talked earlier about how we have a 30-year life gap in our district. Well, my first 100 days in office, I would want to put together a healthcare and life expectancy task force
Mm.
of experts, of community members, of environmentalists, of student activists to help us figure out what those top priority social determinants are that we need to tackle. Come back to me, let me know that these are the areas that we think you need to tackle. Go to Congress, fight in appropriations, for that money, make the case at different federal departments. But I only get to that place of speaking as an expert and being able to advocate in that way for the district if I was able to co govern with this task force that was put into place to educate me and to advocate on behalf of their communities. So I think that the breakdown of the trust in our government comes from a lack of communication, but it also comes from a lack of not building leaders from the grassroots instead of the
Mhm.
grass tops, right? And Ella Baker teaches us that, right? That we build leaders up in their communities from the grassroots. And that's kind of the core of
Right.
what co-governance is. And I think that every congressional office and really every legislative office should work like that.
You are still the organizer in chief, I can tell. This is amazing. So number 8, advances universal healthcare and education.
I mean, I think it's yes, and I think it's just necessary. It's past time, it's high time. We do a good talk about how we want to build up strong local economies and fortify our economy. We cannot do that if we don't have a healthy workforce, right? We know that medical debt is the number one form of ways that people are going bankrupt in the United States of America. I met a young woman in the North Lawndale community here in the west side of Chicago who she's a child, has type 2 diabetes, and has to share her insulin vial with her grandparents because they can't afford insulin, right? And so this goes back to the conversation of our budget being a moral document and what we believe we should be investing in. And so you said universal healthcare, childcare,
And education.
and
Um,
education.
which you can put
So
childcare under the education umbrella, I think. It's like
you could put childcare
yeah,
under the
yeah,
pipeline, but also childcare wildly expensive,
right.
taking up sometimes 40, 30% of people's paychecks. That's not, before they have to pay rent or mortgage, right? And so it goes into the conversation of how do you get an education? Parents are not going to be able to advance their education if we don't have a universal child care system put into place, right? If we are not investing in Head Start, right? These are these are great investments that will have a high yield of return of investment if we do it now, right? As we continue to kick the can down the road, we see our literacy rates slip. We see, our math skills amongst third graders slip, and we're just not taking that seriously. If I could put my criminal justice reform hat on, we know they build prisons based off of those literacy tests for third graders and those test scores. That is true. That's not a conspiracy. And so when we talk about this, we want to build schools, not more prisons,
Right.
right? We want to invest in communities, not cages. And so that's just an easy way to say, let's invest in people. And then education has become one of the greatest financial decisions for people now in this lifetime. Um, People are in crushing student loan debt. They don't see a way out. It is some of the most dangerous debt that you can have because there's no cap on the interest rates. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. Even when you defer it, it can continue to grow. And so I think we have to push. Some people think but it's a moonshot fight. but I think we do have to eliminate student loan debt, free up our GDP, and invest that money back into the economy.
Oh my god.
So 1.3, I think it's like 1.8 trillion now. I have to go back and look at the numbers, but it's a ridiculous
Mhm.
amount of money that we are not going to be able to pay back in a generation. And
Yeah.
so let's hit the reset button on that and take all of that money to stimulate the economy again.
1000%. I was a two-issue voter for Biden, without getting into the weeds of the first issue, the second issue was student loan debt cancellation. I was like, "Dude, I am voting for you for this reason," and I realized the courts did what they did and the Supreme Court did what they did and everything, back to the Supreme Court. But I remember that being, like, my issue, and I'm an independent, for those who weren't already aware. I'm usually pretty vocal about that, but I'm an independent and, a left-leaning independent, obviously, and I just am like, this could be rocket fuel for the economy if we could just fricking do it and stop
There
wringing
you
our
go.
hands over it. It's insane. Alright, the final one, not the least, but sometimes the most contentious, commits to a multilateral non-interventionist foreign policy. So,
Yeah.
this this is this is one of those, there's a lot of different theories, and I welcome all things. I am obviously very non-interventionist as a platform, but I do understand that this is a complex topic, so I'm happy to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So I'm very proud to be endorsed by Peace Action, which is an anti war, pro peace political action committee on the national level. And we have to bring diplomacy back.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not being utilized, it is not being curated, it is not being taught to our rising leaders. Um, we are seeing an administration that is friends with dictators across the globe, which is incredibly frustrating. We are alienating a lot of our allies in ways that I think is dangerous. And I think that the constant response has been to go into countries and instead of invest in infrastructure, invest in environmental green economies, things that could help those countries. It has been to bomb them, to go to war, to start proxy wars, and those wars are endless. Blank checks. It's 20 years. We reap no benefit from it. Thousands, millions of civilians are harmed, killed, injured in the process, and it damages our reputation on a global stage. And so this is one of the very like pressing issues of my campaign. I know people say all politics are local, but it's very hard for me to make the case, Kate, to families in Illinois 7 why we don't have schools or grocery stores or safety in our community, but we always have money to go to war. We always have money. And so I would really like to see diplomacy really used in a lot of these decisions. I would like to see the president not usurp the power of Congress and make unilateral decisions by stripping those congressional powers and constitutional powers, quite frankly, of our Congress. And I would like to see us invest our money. I would actually like to see us slash our Pentagon budget.
Yeah.
The Pentagon, which has not passed an audit in like 8 years, right? And put that money towards stimulating the economy, strengthening our local economies, strengthening our infrastructure, strengthening the ability for people to get education, access to healthcare, housing, etc. So I'm very passionate about it. And I know like my background in gun violence prevention work is my political praxis for that. I always tell people I didn't choose organizing, organizing chose me. I witnessed a young person gunned down in my community and I knew the victim and I knew the shooter and it changed the entire trajectory of my life. But I also knew that the bullet was flying long before anybody pulls the trigger. So when we talk about violence, we have to address the structural violence
Mhm.
and we have to address the economics to what leads to that. And so I think that all ties into the global conversation um, of how we approach these issues in geopolitics, which I don't think have been approached in a very good manner.
Yeah. very
A productive
coun
manner, right?
right. Yeah, I was gonna say very counterproductive, I would say, unless you're the military industrial complex. I love your thoughts on this, and I try to tell people, I don't say it loud enough, so I'll say it here as loudly as possible. Support our troops and the defense budget are not the same thing.
Right.
A third on a good day of that Pentagon budget is for actual military pay, for barracks, for military construct, like all that kind of stuff. The other two-thirds of that trillion something dollars that we send
Yep.
are unaudited, as you said, because it just is like they try to audit and it's like, well, no idea where any of this went, is going towards research and development or whatever,
Mm.
contracting. And this last round is no different, and they're getting ready to pass the defense appropriations bill if we can get through all these hurdles so far. And two-thirds of that money is going towards those things. And you can argue with me about that if you want, again, on your not you, obviously, we're on the same page, but anyone who's listening can argue with me about that on their own time.
I mean,
But
you can't support the troops when the troops are leading in suicide deaths because they
right,
don't have access to mental health facilities.
right,
So, like, you have to walk the talk, right? If you're saying that we need to support our troops, there's a lot of veterans who would love good housing. There are a lot of veterans who would like to be homeowners eventually, right? There are a lot of veterans who would like the health care from all of the trauma that they dealt with by going to these endless wars
right,
and being reintegrated back into American society where war is an abstract thought for our communities because we've never felt war at our front doorsteps.
yeah,
And so, if you're going to support the troops and make that argument, put your money where your mouth is
right,
on that conversation. And I'm all for that. If we slash the military, but if I could wave a magic wand, Kate, and they say, Kina, we'll give it to you, we'll slash the military budget. I'd put that money into the VA. I'd put that money towards veterans. I'd put that money towards bettering their lives. So, I mean, it's the height of hypocrisy.
right,
And not to mention the destabilization of the folks overseas who have to deal with us coming in so aggressive as we have and destabilizing their lives as well.
right.
And so, and it's an environmental issue. I mean, we could go on and on about it.
Oh yeah. Well, and then
We
we're
go on
gonna
and on about it.
right, and then we're gonna complain when immigrants show up on our borders because after we just
I know.
dismantled their countries, like, that's my next favorite hypocrisy. I'm like, maybe we don't decapitate countries and then wonder why their people flood out of them and are like, "Let me go to the United States. I heard that there's prosperity there." Like,
Right,
hello.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, we could talk forever, and clearly you are the candidate of our dreams for Illinois 7. That is clear. We're at wild card time, where I want to ask you aside from these grand federal policies, which you clearly have such a pulse on, but you mentioned it earlier, the co-governance thing, like you are clearly plugged into your district as well. What would you be doing for Illinois 7 specifically if they elected you on in March for the primary and then November 3rd for the general election?
So good. That's such a great question. The first thing is, Kate, unfortunately, because we've seen an increased presence of ICE in
Mm,
Chicago and Donald Trump and his administration is targeting the city of Chicago, we have to implement a comprehensive, efficient, rapid response from one end of the district to the next. That means training people and even if they're going to do civil disobedience, proper trainings on that, know your rights trainings, opening up a hotline, building an app, right, that community members can talk in. So I'm envisioning this and seeing that's in the immediate. We have to protect our neighbors who are being kidnapped, who are being brutalized in our streets. And as we saw, unfortunately, in Minneapolis, civilians are being gunned down in broad daylight on the streets. And so we have to implement a comprehensive, efficient, rapid response system across Illinois 7 that quite frankly does not exist right now in our district. I think secondly, I'm going to improve constituent services. I know people think that's so corny, but I'm like, no.
Right.
They have the congressional office in district because people want to be able to come to their congressperson when they can't get their social security check, when they're having issues, which we're seeing a backlog in visas and immigration courts. They, need access to Medicare or have a question about Medicare or their student loan. So I want to improve the constituent services across Illinois 7, not just town halls, but making ourselves accessible to the voters in this district, knocking on their doors, not just when it's election time, but asking them, knocking on their door and asking them, how can we help you right before the election even happens? And then finally, I think everybody wants to see a stronger economy. They do. That is the tabletop issue that everybody is talking about, affordability. They want to be able to afford their medicine, their food, and their mortgage or rent every month. And being an advocate by not taking corporate PAC money, by listening to worker centers across the district who are doing these amazing actions and doing amazing work, and advocating and drafting legislation that's going to help America as a whole, not just the Illinois 7, is going to be top priorities. Gun violence is always going to be near and dear to my heart. It's always at the core. Unfortunately, Illinois 7 holds 26% of all gun violence in the state of Illinois happens in our district.
Wow.
So over a quarter of it in our tiny little district. And as a survivor, as an advocate, as somebody who served as executive director for one of the largest gun violence prevention nonprofits in the state of Illinois, served on the Biden Harris transition team for gun violence prevention, that is the civil rights fight for us right now, is that people have a chance to live. 40,000 deaths by way of guns are 40,000 deaths that could be prevented. So, and I believe that. I believe we can live in a future free of gun violence.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. I am sold. If I were still in Chicago, I'd be voting for you. But on that note, Illinois 7 and people who might want to support Illinois 7, they looking for something to do, feel like their district is good, they are happy with their incumbent or whatever. That's all great. But Kina needs your help. So, Kina, where can people find you? How can they support you? Any volunteerism? How do we donate? And remind us again of your election dates. What's the final date to register to vote? Like all that good stuff.
Yep. So we're really lucky. We have great election laws here in Illinois. So you can actually register the day of if you go in and vote. So shout out to Chicago Votes and all the amazing organizations who've advocated for that. Our election is March 17th. Polls close at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We are almost 6 weeks out from the election. So we are really close to the finish line. People can go to KinaCollinsIL.com. So that's KinaCollinsil.com to sign up to volunteer virtually. If you want a phone bank, if you don't live in the district, if you're close by or in a sister district, come knock some doors with us, write postcards, and please donate. Donate to your candidates who are not taking corporate PAC money, because while these elections are not all about money, we have to make sure that we build up the war chest that we need to push back. And I would say that's the number one issue for Black women is visibility and fundraising. And so I'm really excited to be making history even by running. I'm one of the youngest Black women in the history of Illinois to run for Congress. And I'm really excited to carry that torch on at Illinois 7.
That's incredible. Yeah, first of all, like I said, I'm like starry-eyed right now. So this is fantastic. And I have definitely said it in other candidate interviews. We can't complain about the corporate PAC money and the super PACs and the special interests if we, the people, do not invest in the candidates that we want. Because at the end of the day, we're in a cash-based economy, and these elections run on money and advertising and whatnot, and that's the only way. We don't need as much money, quite frankly, because you're not purchasing your congresswoman's already for you. You're not having to purchase her opinion. You're just needing to get her name out there, which is infinitely less expensive. But it still costs money. So yes, donate. When I send out this recording, for those who are listening now or be listening later, I will include links to where you can find Kina, all the election dates. And as she kind of mentioned at the top of this interview, the primary is going to be basically the election because it's a
There
blue
you go.
district. They're all going to vote Democrats. So St. Patrick's Day is really the day for Illinois 7, which is very fitting for Chicago. I feel like that's a significant holiday for for Chicago. Someone who is a little bit Irish. So
Yeah.
it's just a lot. Amazing. Kina, thank you so much for your time this evening. And sorry again, everybody, for the technical difficulties. We were having a whole conference call and everything, trying to figure it out, but we got here. I am very excited to blast this out. Please follow Kina on all things, donate, volunteer for all the things she just talked about. We got 6 weeks to get her into this seat, and she is clearly the candidate of our dreams. So really,
Well, Kate, I just want to thank you because this is so important right now that we are shaping the narrative about what's happening. And in an administration that is pushing anti intellectualism, thank you for holding candidates' feet to the fire to think outside of the box of what we are traditionally asked and really get us on the record before we get elected about what we care about and what we stand for. And I'm immensely grateful that you've invited me into your space. So thank you.
absolutely. Thank you for being here. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thank you, Kina.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.